to Therapy Insiders podcast. Dr. Gene Shirakabrad here with Dr. Urson Religioso. What's up, Urs?
How's it going, Gene? Therapy Insiders Live, Ep 2.
Yep, episode 2 of the live format. Had a good reception after last week's episode. It's good to be back. Good to hear the feedback from the episode again. The questions were great.
Even if I couldn't answer them or interpret them.
That's details. This week, I want to talk about two instances, two examples that happened to me that I think are important to share. One was a solid win. The other one was a giant slap in the face a bit based on my own kind of failure in the moment. So I want to cover those. And the other piece I want to talk about is a concept called the burden of knowledge and what happens to experts as they gain more knowledge and really go towards mastery, which is, I think, what a lot of people want to do as you get better at whatever you're doing. So I want to talk about those two, and then that concept after I get your current level of excitement for the new Avengers movie.
My current level of excitement, I have shipped via Amazon Prime a full-on like Under Armour skin-tight version of Captain America's uniform. I was going to order just like, the retro-looking T-shirt with the round shield on it. But then when I saw like people who bought this also bought this, which is always great as a personalized suggestion, it looks just like his like shield updated version. And it's like skin tight. Probably won't look as good as me as it does on Chris Evans, but I am ready. Ready. My brother is driving 4 hours just to see it with me on IMAX 2D Sunday night. So I am staying off of social media. I know, Gene, are you excited? I know that you basically went down a spoiler rabbit hole on Reddit and couldn't stop yourself. So no spoilers today.
Look, I messed up a bit. But yes, I know, I read the comics, so I know what happens in the comics. And Marvel is usually does a pretty good job of following what the comics say. They don't go too far out. Obviously, there were some changes like in Civil War with Captain not getting killed. Spoiler alert. But I wanted to know one thing, Urson. I wanted to know one.
Who's going to die? Is it Chris Evans or?
I'm not going to say.
I know.
No,
well,
no, I'm not going to.
Don't say anything. I would.
No. I would never do that. No, but I did. I went down I read an entire review of somebody that saw it in Australia, and there was a bunch of spoilers. Essentially, just spoiled the movie. But here's what I'm going to say, Urson. A lot of it does follow the comics, so it's not a huge spoiler. But reading those spoilers made me want to see the movie even more than I did before seeing it. And maybe that's my personality, that I'm more interested in the execution of it than like the shocking moments. And even seeing it is still going to be cool because I have a picture in my head of how I would do it and how I would visualize it as a filmmaker, or how I think they would do it. But then to actually see it in action, I think it still has that wow effect.
Sure.
So I'm even more excited now knowing what to expect and what I expected that's not going to be in there, because I think it's going to take away a lot of potential disappointment of things that I was maybe thinking would be in there, but I found out aren't. So then I could just go in and I know exactly what to expect. I know exactly what I want to see, and I'm really excited for it. And I think it's going to be cool. Unlike when I went to see The Last Jedi, and I was mostly disappointed.
You're into that camp. I love The Last Jedi, but I know. I just hope it doesn't take you as long as it took you to see Rogue One. We won't be able to talk about this for like 6 months or something. I'm
going to try to go see it really, really soon. But yeah, look, I had no interest in Rogue One.
It's the best Star Wars movie ever.
It's no, I mean, one of the only redeeming qualities of Rogue One was the end Vader scene where he just kills everyone.
It's dark. It's different. You don't know who's going to survive, unlike other prequels. It's a problem with Solo too. The latest trailer. I'm excited for it now, but it's not an alternate timeline. He's just going to stay alive the whole time.
No, I've no interest in Solo. nothing about that movie interested me. Prequels in general, I have very little interest for because we see the people where they're going, right? We know the end result, and I feel like you, as an audience, you get some of that creative internal processing taken away by them showing you exactly how it was. I want to imagine, Urson. Let me imagine Disney, for God's sake.
Oh, you want to imagine? Meanwhile, are you one of those people who are like, what about Snoke's backstory? Oh my gosh, not everyone needed a backstory.
I could care less about
What
him.
about Rey's parents? Hey, you know what? She's no one special. Just like Anakin wasn't anyone special.
But that's beside the point. That J.J. Abrams established strong narrative insights or hints that it's going to be something. It's called falsifying the narrative when you set something up like that, and then Ryan, what's his name, just goes, nope.
Well,
Everything that you saw in that initial movie.
They gave Ryan Johnson the new trilogy, not JJ.
I know, but JJ still directing the last one.
We'll see. Maybe there'll be redemption for you.
But it's the importance of telling a story and the importance of words, which kind of leads me into one of my two stories I want to share, Urson. I'm going to start off.
Welcome to Untold Physio Stories.
It really is taking a little taste of that for this, but I think that they should be shared because they happened at Recharge. One was, I'll start with the win because I think it speaks to physical therapy as a whole, which I think it's a cool perspective. So we talked about this a little bit at last episode about Recharge, that it's a combination of fitness and physical therapy. We essentially act as a triage center for our community. So if something musculoskeletal happens, they should see us first. So it becomes like an urgent care, becomes a trusted area that we can direct people where they need to go. So we had a patient, a former patient call, and our patients are our community members mostly. And so she calls and she's like, oh, I would like to have her child come in, and I'm going to try to be as kind of broad as possible, not to give away anything. So she's like, my child hurt themselves. Can they come in to see you? And I said, what happened? Blah, blah, blah. They fell, and essentially she wanted to rule out a fracture. And she's like, well, I can go to urgent care, but I trust you because you've seen me before, and I think you know what you're talking about. And, and can I come in? And she called. It was like 4:20 in the evening, and she wanted to get in that same day. Now, if you're insurance based, that's pretty much unheard of, right? Because you have to go through authorizations. It's not impossible, obviously. It happens. But so happened to be at 5:00, which is our break between classes. We have class of 4 and 6. We had a break that day. I asked Ryan if he could see him, and he said, yeah, absolutely, have him come in. And she did. She brought her child in, and Ryan checked him out and had a thorough evaluation of what he wanted. She had a peace of mind, saved herself probably a few $100s based on what she, if she went to urgent care and spent hours there waiting. And it was just another kind of little microscopic proof of the model where you had a call, somebody came in because of trust, because of efficiency, because of cost, like all these variables rolled into one, created just a good experience where they can just come in within 40 minutes, get assessed, and really have something that turned into like a musculoskeletal urgent care type of situation. So that was really cool, Urson, to experience that. That was the win of that.
Sounds good. That's why I love Cash PT. That's why I do Cash PT.
Yeah, so that was big. And then on the flip side of that,
story.
The dark side of the light side. So we get people that call often, and the when people don't understand the models, one of the first things they ask, and I'm sure any out of network practitioner understands this, is, do you take my insurance? Because that's what people are kind of trained to ask, because if they have insurance, therefore they have coverage, and in that narrative, they pay less, which is, we know, is not the case. So we started talking, and we're developing, I think, a really awesome script here for that question and how to guide people through that call. And so we got through the conversation, and we offer a visit. We want people to come in, because when people come in to recharge, we have pretty much a 99% success rate once they get to experience the experience. And so I said, just, are you available to drop in today so we can kind of chat a little bit more? And she's like, well, let me check. And then
hold on, I got to pause. Are you talking about a discovery visit, like some people call it?
Essentially, yeah. We just need people to come in and have a face-to-face, so it's a better connection. And so she's like, well, stuff going on, let me call you back later. And she did. She called back later. She's like, hey, I'm going to be passing through. Can I stop by now? So I said, sure, come on by. And she came in. We sat down and started talking. And it's just, everything that I teach and talk about, and all of the best principles, and about listening, and everything that I know, I did none of. It was just
okay. So let's role play that, because I'm not sure how this went down. If I said, so you said on the phone, you don't take my insurance. What do you mean? Why wouldn't you take my insurance?
Not even that, Urson.
Okay.
So you're Nancy. Okay. This is not her name. We're just creating personas. You're Nancy. And so Nancy, come on in. Have a seat, Nancy. How are things, Nancy?
Well, really bad.
Yeah. Your back's bothering you, right, Nancy?
I don't know. I didn't even mention my back.
Well, let's Nancy, your back's bothering you.
Okay. Oh, my back.
Yes, go ahead.
It's killing
ahead.
me.
That's great. That's fantastic, Nancy. Please stop talking now. Let me take over from now. Okay, Nancy, just go ahead and sit there. Stop it.
How it went down?
Stop it. Yes, Nancy, please stop talking. let me spend the next 15 minutes. Let's spend the next 15 minutes just pain sciencing the shit out of you when you asked absolutely none of that. You were here for an experience, and I just absolutely just pain scienced, just textbook nonstop. And then after I got to breathe, after 15 minutes of nonstop talking, Nancy goes, so you're saying it's all in my head? I don't agree with what you're saying right now, because, and then she just went on and explained about how she had shitty experiences with other clinicians and stuff with her family, that other clinicians said that, you just have to wait it out, or that were missed with her family. And I'm just going there, sitting there going, yep. I just did absolutely everything that I know not to do, and how to, it was just one of those moments in time where I think long term it was great. It was great to experience something like that as a learning moment, right? Because I think once we get into this loop, but I was just sitting there listening to her, going, yeah. It was a train wreck that started happening as soon as my ass hit that chair and hers, and it was just brutal. It was brutal, but looking back, it was good to assess. But Nancy did not come back. The
bad discovery visit.
The only thing she discovered is that I'm an asshole. That's what she discovered.
Oh, that's happened to me several times, and actually, we podcasted right after one of them. I don't know if you remember from like 2 or 3 years ago. We got on a podcast, and I was so shaken up by how bad I was being screamed at for like 20 minutes by some guy who's very, very similar to your first scenario. He was calling around to all these PT places. He ended up even calling me twice without even realizing that he called me twice, asking me if he can get in. Can you get me in tonight? Can you get me tonight? That's back when I still had later evening hours. And I said, sure, I'll get you in. He's like, okay, I'll call you back. And, he called and asked me if he can get me in, or I can get him in. And I said, yeah, I spoke with you today? And, I decided to do it because he said he was an osteopathic school. And
I remember that.
He's a CrossFitter, and he's hurt himself doing battle ropes. And, this is back when I'm sure I had a baby. As many times every other year I have a newborn and I'm getting lack of sleep and my wife just wants me home. I schedule him like 6 p.m. He ends up showing up 6:45. And I've said many, many times, even on an Untold Physio Stories podcast, my last patient is 10 minutes late. I usually lock up and leave because I just have places to be, and I think it's disrespectful, whatever, not even a phone call or a text these days. I just have no time for those type of people because in my experience, one time is forgivable, but on the one podcast, someone was late like 3 times before they apologized. And then the next time they called and said they were going to be late. So I was like, how late are you going to be? So anyway, this guy, he comes in, he doesn't fill out his paperwork. And he takes another 15 minutes to fill out his paperwork in the bathroom or in the locker room. I do the same thing, very pain sciencey. People usually say something about lumbar or x-ray or something. I have a diatribe that I almost can't stop myself from saying.
Mm-hmm.
Research, x-rays, no correlation between scans and pain, this and that. Most people are into it. I should be able to tell when they're not. He was kind of on and off. So we get through the whole evaluation. I find out that his shoulder pain seems like it's very strongly influenced by cervical spine. I give him I treat cervical spine. I do resets. His shoulder motion is better. He just pretty much stops me at the end and says, look, I don't care about the neck. I just want your top 3 differential diagnoses for the shoulder. I'm like, look, I don't really care what your MRI said, this and that. And I'm trying to tell him that people who get an MRI and have manual therapy, education, and exercise, and people who don't get an MRI and have the same exact program, the people who get the MRI end up doing worse. He doesn't care about any of this. And I said, okay, look, if I had to make 3 educated guesses, it would be rotator cuff tendinopathy, a shoulder impingement, whatever that is, whatever that means to you as an osteopath in training. And I don't even know what my third one was. Cervical radiculopathy, even though he didn't want to hear that. I give him exercises. He leaves. The next day, he calls me and I say, hey, look, have you done your exercises? Big pause. He's like, no, Erson, I haven't done my exercises. And I'm like, well, why is that? He's like, because you are the worst physical therapist I have ever been to. I've been a lot of physical therapists in my time, and you're a fraud, Erson. You're a fraud. He starts screaming at me, dropping F-bombs. My wife was across the room. She could hear him as if he was in the room. And I was so taken aback. First I'm talking about, he's like, I don't care about research. It turns out that he had a very similar, what he explained as a similar research-based, evidence-based, they told him his MRIs didn't matter, this and that. He ended up with lumbar fusions. Whatever. I didn't even know that because he didn't fill that out in his history that took him like 15 minutes to fill out. And, I just ended up refunding him and like hanging up. I had to hang up on him and I just refunded him with that. But I was so shaken up. I've never been yelled at like that before. By anyone. He was irate, and I can see why. If he had a similar kind of pain science or evidence-based experience, he ended up with surgery, I can see why he would have been so upset. But I don't know if it could have gone any other way. I mean, it's not like he wasn't non-receptive to me, and he was listening, but it happens to the best of us. Yeah, it does.
It almost has to, right? Because like you said, it was the script. It was instead of stopping and breathing and asking questions and guiding the conversation, it was, she said what's wrong with her. And at that time, the stuff that I was saying was with the intent of helping her, to help her understand, to help her get a sense of who we are. I think your question was, well, what are we going to do here? And my thought process was, let me explain to her what she should prepare for, what it's going to be like, that pain is a construct, that it's a process, that it depends on a bunch of things, which turn into blah, 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 research, blah, 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 blah. It's all in your head, blah, blah, blah. That's what she heard. And it was, I think it was great in the long term. Again, it sucked in the interim. I felt bad for her because she had to go through that. I didn't really feel bad for myself necessarily because I at this point, I'm kind of trained myself to experience those moments a little bit differently. I was like, oh, okay, this is a novel situation right now, right? This is a novel input in the context of experience. And I think it's going to help long term as a business owner, as a clinician. But I really felt bad for her because I truly believed that we could help her, and we could help her better than others, because I was telling her, I remember I said, you know, on average, we see people for like 3 to 5 visits at recharge. We don't really see patients beyond that. Just the way we're structured and built, the first 3 visits, it's going to be really a kind of an escalation, a build up to get better. And then we help kind of teach you how to take ownership of that and really sustain that. And again, by the time I got to that point, she was gone. There was no hearing that. And what she heard was the 3 visits that we see her for is that we're pushing a quick fix. She's like, well, what if I'm not better in 3 visits? You know, I've heard the quick fixes before from other clinicians. Like, no, you don't understand. It's not a quick fix. But at that point, again, I'm fighting a losing battle because of the start. The start was just completely off. But now I know it's made me a lot more aware of that conversation, which I usually am. But for some reason, it just happened.
Right. I mean, she could have been super receptive, and it could have been a huge win, you know.
And they usually are. They usually are.
Yeah.
But it's all about that initial interaction of, instead of me going on a diatribe, you know, scholarly explanation of pain science and what pain is, it's usually a lot more conversational and back and forth. But it wasn't, for some reason at that moment, it wasn't. And the end result justified my performance.
Right. Well, what's one of the definitions of an expert? They recognize patterns, but they also learn from their mistakes, right?
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, that's the point I really want to talk about, Erson.
That was my segue. I'm not as good as segue as Gene.
That was a clutch segue, buddy. This is something that's really important that we've talked about in our Facebook groups, and I've tweeted about a little bit, that I think experts need to really understand this. And this is the concept of burden of knowledge, that the more expertise you have, the more experience you gain, you start to live in the world of nuance versus the world of global thought. So think of it this way, Erson. It's most people live in a yes and no world. Most people live in you ask a question that's a yes and no question. Experts live in a it depends world, in that nuance of the yes and no. As you get more seniority, as you have more time under whatever experience or whatever profession you're in, for professional growth, you start to focus in on nuance. You start to focus in on specificity, because to live in global terms is there's no growth in that, right? There's no professional growth in constantly being a globalist and not trying to get into nuance. The dichotomy here happens is that as you become more of an expert and you seek more nuance for your professional growth, your ability to connect on a global scale gets worse, because you start to know and think differently. And the ability to resonate and connect with your audience who do not speak like that becomes a very difficult chore. So you always have to have the ability to come back and connect with the global audience. And here's the real kicker here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
This is like something I've been struggling with for many years.
Yeah, but there's two pieces here. Mm-hmm. There's a width and there's a depth. There's a width of knowledge where you resuscitate information, which we see all the time at this point, because there's such a huge information asymmetry that Dan Pink talks about. But the kicker here is that the people that have the width of information, the superficial experts, they have just enough information to connect with the audience because they're not experts, but they come off as somebody that knows more than the person seeking that information. And they're better at connecting with a mass audience because they don't live in the weeds. They're passing along information that they probably learned from an expert or saw somewhere, and then they do a better job of connecting with the mass audience than the actual experts that have the depth of knowledge, right? This is the fight. This is the struggle that we're going through right now, that a lot of clinicians are bitching and moaning about. Well, this person, who are they? Like they don't have any expert degrees or experience or anything else, but they have a huge following. They have so much people. They have so much leverage because they skim the information just enough, but they still are able to connect with the mass audience. This is a big problem for experts, because they need to be able to look back at those people and say, what are they doing to connect? How are they using this information? Instead of saying, oh, that's not accurate, that's not science-based. Learn how to connect with that mass audience. Learn from those people instead of just always bashing them,
right,
or ignoring them. Use that for your information. So use the nuance and bring it from a depends question to answer a better way, the yes and no question, and connect with that audience. So that's my little thoughts on this whole mastery and nuance stuff first.
Yeah, I think everyone wants to master whatever it is they're trying to do. Better manual therapist, better strength coach, better fitness. And the more you master something, it becomes second nature to you. I think it's difficult to relate back to basics. And even when I started teaching manual therapy courses as soon as I graduated. Like the first year, I was already teaching Con Ed courses for the local schools. And within 5 years, I was like part of a couple fellowship programs. And, I was self-proclaimed expert before all the experience came. And it's funny because, you just want to further and further and further yourself. And you and I talk about this the first so many years of your career, when you devote yourself to being a great manual therapist, for example, you think you know it all. And it's funny because when you start to get into nuance and mastery, you realize you don't know it all. And there's actually more, the more of an expert you become, there's more uncertainty. And I talk about this a lot. My struggle is, one, trying to remember where any of my seminar or mentees are in their career, whether they're a new grad, fresh PT, or even 10 years out. What do they know compared to what I know? And really, what am I trying to do with them? I think I used to teach very traditionally, very technique-based. Hey, this is how you assess a shoulder. This is how you treat a shoulder. And now I'm just trying to teach patterns, because I realized probably about 6-7 years ago, that I couldn't teach. Everyone is teaching the same types of courses. It's like, this is how you assess and treat. This is exactly what you should do. These are the assessments. These are the treatments, and these are the exercises. Versus what I try to teach now is, this is what I've learned from various people. These are the patterns that I've come to see as an expert, and these patterns, as a result, are always changing. I mean, you've taken my course a couple years apart. They should be a little different. I don't want to teach the same thing year to year to year to year. So I try to teach people patterns, because one of the things that research shows about experts versus non-experts in whatever field is pattern recognition. So the only thing that I could teach you, I can't teach you my experience. I can't give you 20 years of mistakes and how I adapted from them. But what I can tell you is, if you see a neck, if you see a foot, if you see a hip, whatever the complaint is, look at these things. If you see these patterns, try these things. And if you don't see the patterns, then do whatever it is you were going to do. Because we're all experts in a way of our field. And I'm not trying to turn you into me. And I think that's what many commercial models try to do. They try to, and many instructors try to do. They just try to turn you exactly into them. And you can't be them.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I think that's a great point. Help people teach themselves and adjust and adapt versus just copy. But that's the whole depth versus width conversation as well. Let's finish out. We had a question come in from Care Connections. You talk about successful exchanges being a back and forth. What questions do you find work best to start your conversations with a prospective patient? That's a good question. It's for me, it's not necessarily what questions, but what type of questions. And those are open-ended what and how questions usually work best. This is for pretty much for any conversation. This is a intro conversation or even a negotiation. Open-ended what, how questions really do a good job of steering the conversation, but being in control of it, but still letting the person kind of guide within your narrative that you're pushing. So how are you doing? What brings you in? And then along, again, broad, open-ended, then you can start to narrow in that question and then start to widen out again when you need to kind of open it up for or to redirect a bit. What about yours?
Well, I've done this many different ways, and for the first good 10 years of my career, it was very much a one-sided conversation. It was a big struggle for me, even though I was asking them questions about them. They were close-ended, and I didn't ask a lot of open-ended questions. So I always start off with just how are you today, other than the reason for why you're here. Because most people are like, my back hurts. And I'm like, no, because they're not even hearing what you said. You're actually genuinely interested in them as a person as opposed to what they're here for. And I'm like, no, other than the reason for why you're here. And that's I could even tell almost how the exchange is going to go, because if they're like, oh, great, but my back hurts, or like, oh, I had one woman say like, my son's in jail. And, she starts crying, and I just think, got a box of tissues and then rescheduled the visit, because that's probably not a good time to see that person. But yeah, I think open-ended questions is good. I think also, if you have a certain way of explaining things, like Gene and I are very much into pain science, and I try to be very fluid with that. I say you can't force, the square block into the round hole. Every time someone schedules with me online, I have via an autoresponder, I'm like, hey, here's some videos that I think you should watch, videos that I've made to kind of explain pain science and the things I'm going to go over with. Here's Greg Lehman's excellent recovery strategies book, which is the book that I would have written if I had like 10 years to write it, and I was as evidence-based, as news much research in the back of my head as Greg did. I think like prefacing before you come in, so it's not brand new, and giving them a little homework, so I can just say, other than, how are you doing today? Get that out of the way. Did you read the book? What did you think about that? What do you think? What do you think of that in relation to your shoulder, your back, or whatever you're here for? I find that helps break the ice a little bit, because they already know a little bit about what where you're coming from, and then it can still be back and forth. And I think it also helps when you are done explaining, as long as it's back and forth, just to say, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions about anything? I try to ask that regularly, because people just, as G knows, it's easy to go on a diatribe.
I know all too well. Look, Erson, don't get me wrong. I still love me a good soapbox. It's just you have to have it set up at a point where the person is looking up at you, ready for a soapbox, versus when they're skimming and looking around and they have no idea what a soapbox is. You just look like somebody spitting at them and talking too loudly. So it's just knowing when to set up your soapboxes. That's the important piece.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks for tuning in. Episode 2 in the books. Again, follow us subscribe on iTunes, at Google Play. If you like more of a traditional podcast, kind of what we've been doing. Obviously, if you're watching live, think about liking our Facebook page at UpDoc Media, at Modern Manual Therapy. We'll be live streaming, and wherever you find us, check in on Twitter at Therapy Insiders, at the OMPT. If you have any questions, for the love of God, please don't email us, tweet at us, or shoot us a Facebook message.
I don't mind the emails. I actually respond to them a little bit easier than on the social media. So
yeah, I'm still lumping you in with me, because together we are stronger. All right, so thanks for tuning in, Erson. Enjoy Avengers.
I will.
We can talk about it, because I know the
spoiler-free review is coming.
Yeah, so we can at least chat about it before I see it. So that'll be good. But hope everyone enjoyed the episode. If you're watching on Facebook and you have some questions after you watch the replay, shoot us a comment down below. We'll come back and check on it, whichever page you're on, and just keep a conversation going. Let us know your thoughts on the debate about, or discussion about, experts and nuance. How you aware you're even doing it? Is burden of knowledge a challenge for you? And have you had similar situations like I did, where you just derailed a conversation because you just essentially blindsided and burned the face off somebody by nonstop talking? So look forward to hearing from you. And thanks again for tuning in to Therapy Insiders Podcast.
I just got to say, my parents were like, oh, we watched your live presentation on Facebook. That other guy, he talks so much. I was like, I actually talk a lot on the podcast too, but there's some questions there that I felt unqualified to answer. Yes, Gene.
Yes, this is I do talk a lot.
Therapy Insiders Podcast with persistent guests. Video, so.
Yeah. All right. I got to jump off to another meeting.
Okay, I'll see you there.
All right, buddy. I'll see you at 1 for that one.
Yep. I got the Hangouts link somewhere, right? Is it in the same? Was it an email or what? I forget. Yeah, it was on an email chain.
Yeah.
All right. See you there.
All right, buddy.